chapter. It's really exciting to see SWISE grow this big and see so many people so passionate about it and like just doing really great things. So thank you for having me. I'm going to jump right into this. I do want to give a bit of a disclaimer. I have closed captioning at the bottom of all my presentations. They just listen as I speak. So if that's distracting, just let me know. But if anybody needs it in particular, I want to make sure that it's up there. So I'm going to jump right into it. And so about me, Stephanie gave me an amazing introduction. So I'll just repeat a little bit of what she said. So I'm currently an aerospace engineering PhD student at Georgia Tech. I work in the high power electric propulsion lab as a grad student there. And my advisor is the person who runs that lab. His name is Dr. Mitchell Walker, and he's very well known in the electric propulsion community. I had my BS in aerospace engineering from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which is in Daytona Beach, Florida. And my concentration was in astronautics, and my minors were in computational and applied mathematics. So quite a mouthful, but had a really good time at Embry-Riddle. If you are ever looking to fly a plane, learn how to fly a plane, anything aeronautical, Embry-Riddle is a great place to go, even for their master's and PhD program. So I want to make sure I plug them real fast. In general, my goal is to become an astronaut. And I'm sure if you know anything about my social media presence, you already know that. So I'm going to jump on to the next thing. There you go. So I kind of broke my presentation up into two segments. I have like my career experience, and then I have my academic experience. And some of those things do overlap, but I wanted to make sure you guys knew or had a background of the things I've had the opportunity to do, so you know what you can ask questions about and maybe where I can help. So, excuse me. Here is an overview of just a few of the places that I've worked. If you need me to adjust anything on the screen, just let me know. I know it's a compact slide, but it was in my my freshman year of my undergraduate degree, I was able to secure a job with a place called Draper Labs in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so Draper Labs is like a space defense company. I worked there the summer of 2016. It was my first ever summer as a college student, and it was my first internship. So I was 18 years old, I think. And I was living by myself in Massachusetts, working at one of the coolest companies I'd ever heard about for the first time. So that was quite a shock for me. But I gotta say, this specific experience really set the pace for the rest of my undergraduate career and now graduate career. And the way I was able to secure an internship in the first year was because of my involvement in an organization called NSBE. And so NSBE is NSBE, and it stands for the National Society of Black Engineers. And they have an annual kind of like national conference, and they have a career fair. And so all of the engineers around the country in NSBE actually get to convene at this career fair, and there's a bunch of jobs given out. So that's my first plug. I definitely suggest getting involved in various organizations, especially national ones that do hold career fairs, because that's exactly how I was positioned to get my first internship. And that really changed my direction in undergrad from there. So moving on to kind of the right-hand side of the page, this is 2017, or the summer of 2017, when I worked at NASA Glenn Research Center. This specific NASA center is in Cleveland, Ohio. And I actually got my job at NASA through something called the Pathways program. So I would definitely write this down if you're taking notes. The Pathways program is a really cool internship program that actually sets you up for a job right after you graduate college. And this could be undergrad or graduate, depending on how you come in and whatever contract you sign. And so the Pathways program is more like a co-op. So I don't just work there for one summer. I pretty much am signed up to work there and any summer I'm available, essentially. And the way that it works is I actually swear in as a NASA federal civil servant, which just means I'm an actual federal employee. And then, like I said, when I graduate, I'm eligible for full-time conversion. So I definitely recommend the Pathways program. I've had a great time. I was able to land that in my sophomore year of college. And so I've been working there as of September 6th of this year. I've worked there for 4 years straight now. So I've been accumulating some time there at NASA, which has been fun. And so in the summer 2017, I had the opportunity to work on a CubeSat. And so if you don't know what a CubeSat is, CubeSats are essentially nanosatellites. And so if you think of a traditional satellite, you may think of something that's huge and like probably weighs a ton. CubeSats actually condense the operations of traditional satellites, which are typically very large, into the size of a loaf of bread, or they could be a size of a loaf of bread. They're actually measured in units of 1U. And so 1U measures 4 by 4 by 4 inches all around. And so what I'm working on here is something called a 3U CubeSat. And so 3U just means you stacked 3 1U CubeSats on top of the other. And I actually have a model of one right here. So this is what it actually looks like. This would be 1U, that's 2U, this is 3U. And so the length of this is actually comparable to what the actual flight hardware looks like. And this is approximately the size of a loaf of bread. So imagine sending up a satellite that you're used to being however long and super heavy, that size. And so that's what I got to work on and kind of learning about some of the design considerations and problems that come up when you're trying to condense so much material, so much hardware into such a small volume. And so moving down to the bottom right-hand corner, if you can follow my cursor, this was the summer of 2018. And I had the opportunity to work at NASA again, but I was actually working on a different project this time. And it's actually called SCEP. So that stands for Sub-Kilowatt Electric Propulsion. And I'll get into what that means. I have a whole slide on it because that's what my research focus is right now in grad school. But that was a great time. It really set the pace. And I actually credit my ability to get into grad school to that research or internship experience. And so this past summer, I was actually able to work remotely at NASA Glenn Research Center. And I think I missed a year, but I'll go back in a minute. But I was working remotely at NASA Glenn, working on something called the Deep Space Gateway. And if you haven't heard of it yet, the Deep Space Gateway is essentially going to be the International Space Station of the Moon. So it will have a lunar orbiter, and then the goal is to eventually, start lunar surface operations, but we're starting with the Deep Space Gateway. And this specific spacecraft, huge spacecraft, will actually be using electric propulsion. So I had the opportunity to work as a systems engineer on that system this past summer. And then in 2019, I had the opportunity to work at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. And so national laboratories in the US are typically called FFRDCs, so federally funded research development centers. So they're not necessarily like government centers, but they are kind of contractors in a sense. So it was still government work, sort of. And I actually had the opportunity to work in astrophysics. And so if you know about aerospace engineering, you know astrophysics and aerospace engineering do not overlap at all. Like the coursework is totally different. So that was a super interesting opportunity, but I got that opportunity through the GEM Fellowship, which is what Stephanie mentioned before, which is GEM. I encourage anybody first to write that down and look into it, and I'll talk more about that soon. Keep doing that. Okay, cool. So I just kind of wanted to hone in on some of my my favorite kind of work experiences. And so the first is the Albus CubeSat. It was my first spacecraft that I worked on. Spacecraft. It's very tiny, and this is actually the flight hardware that got sent up to space. And so, like I said, I worked there at NASA Glenn summer of 2017. It's a CubeSat, which is a type of nanosatellite. And the purpose of this project was to actually be a technology demonstration of high power in a small volume. So as you would imagine, traditional satellites and nanosatellites probably can't produce the same amount of power. That power is going to be limited by the surface area of their solar panels, which are here. And so obviously with a much smaller spacecraft, you have much smaller solar panels. However, because CubeSats are becoming so ubiquitous and so commonplace in the aerospace market, people are really looking into miniaturizing other systems to make CubeSats more competitive and more versatile when it comes to various space applications. And so what we wanted to know is if we were able to generate a lot of power, how could so small of a volume handle all that power? Because if you have a lot of high power, you probably have a lot of high heat, right? And so when you're closing a volume and you pump it with a bunch of watts and thus heat or thermal energy, you can end up frying your electronics. And so what we were trying to understand was how do we mitigate that? How do we avoid completely ruining our spacecraft bus? And so this actually flew into space with a company called Rocket Labs, who are, I think, in New Zealand, or on that side of the earth. I'm probably super wrong about that. Anyways, it flew to space on one of the Rocket Lab rockets, and my name was actually on the solar panel. So in essence, I tell everybody that I've been to space before because my name's in space, and it probably fried up as it either re-entered or exited the atmosphere, but it doesn't matter. My name was on the panel, so I went to space in my head. That's like my claim to fame. And so my other project that I'm really proud of and really excited about was the H64M thruster. So this was the SCEP project I was talking about, sub-kilowatt electric propulsion. Because I probably haven't explained this yet, but electric propulsion is essentially a class of propulsion that uses external electrical power to ionize a neutral gas and then accelerate it. And so these propulsion devices are very different from like a chemical rocket. And so you've probably seen chemical rockets if you've ever seen a SpaceX launch. Chemical rockets work off of combustion processes. And so you see a big kind of explosion, and then, well, sort of controlled explosion, and then you see a lot of fire and then a plume, and then that's how the rocket gets out or off the ground and then out of our atmosphere. With electric thrusters, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself, but with electric thrusters, they actually don't use combustion. They use what I was talking about, which is ionization of a neutral gas. And so I can't see you all, but I did want to ask, it'd be cool if like somebody unmuted if there are any Star Wars fans, but do we have any Star Wars fans here?
If you want, you can also add it in the chat. The settings are so that nobody can unmute themselves, but the chat is open for everyone.
Gotcha.
So yeah, you can just comment in the chat. And
okay.
I've gotten a few yeses, so there are definitely Star Wars fans.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm assuming that you've seen this specific spacecraft in Star Wars. I think it's called like the Destroyer. Let me see. I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay, cool. So this Destroyer spacecraft, or actually all in Star Wars, they have a bunch of different, it's a classic, cool. They have a bunch of different spacecraft that actually use ion engines. And so I wish I had a video for you. I could probably play one at the end, but if you see them, those ion engines, you know, or their spacecraft, the back of it lights blue, just like in this picture. But then they go really, really fast. And so electric propulsion is essentially that in real life. I wish I could see y'all's faces. I want to see y'all like gasp because I think that's so cool. TIE fighters, yes. What are they called? Twin ion engine fighters. Yes, I see a gasping face. Thank you, Hellis, sir. I hope I pronounced your name right. I'm sorry. But yes, so electric propulsion devices are essentially those Star Wars propulsion devices, but in real life. And so the biggest difference between the Star Wars propulsion devices and the ones that I work on right now are the amount of thrust they produce. So the ones in Star Wars, you see them, they go really, really fast. They're making all these cool noises, et cetera, et cetera. That is not how it is in real life. In real life, electric thrusters are only able to produce enough thrust to hold up a sheet of paper. So if I were to measure how much force it took me to hold up this sheet of paper, that's how much thrust these Hall effect thrusters, or sorry, electric thrusters use. And so that's on the scale or order of millinewtons of thrust. So you're probably like, well, why would you want that? Like, you would go nowhere fast in space. And that's very true. Electric thrusters are best used for long duration space missions because if you know what space is like, you know that it's a vacuum, and you know there's not things like air drag, skin friction drag like we have in our atmosphere. So space, you can essentially travel through space without any inhibitors. And so over time, Hall effect thrusters are actually able to accumulate to very, very, very high speeds, but just in space. They're not able to be used in our atmosphere. I believe the analogy goes, if someone, I apologize, if someone were to put an electric thruster on the back of a car, it would take them 4 days to get up to 60 miles per hour. So that should give you an idea of how slow they are, but they're very efficient. And so if you're comparing them to chemical thrusters or chemical rockets, like I said, chemical rockets use combustion, so they're limited. I'm so sorry for all these noises. They're limited by the amount of energy that are in those bonds. of the fuel that they use. Electric thrusters are only limited by the amount of power that they can impart into the gas that they're ionizing. And so you end up having a very efficient system. So there's something called ISP, which is just kind of like a rocket efficiency. Electric thrusters have a very high ISP, and so they're very desirable for long duration space missions. And that's why I love them. And then just getting a little bit into the technicalities, there are 3 different types of electric thrusters. There's electrostatic, electromagnetic, and there's electrothermal. And so the way these are classified is by the way or by the method that they accelerate the ions. So electrostatic thrusters use electric fields only. Excuse me. Electromagnetic thrusters use electromagnetic fields or electric and magnetic fields. And then electrothermal thrusters use something called neutral gas heating. And so my area of expertise are electrostatic thrusters, and a type of electrostatic thruster is a Hall effect thruster. So, oops, forgot my animations. So here's my grad school experience. I thought this was a good segue considering this is what I work on in my day-to-day life in grad school. So like I said, I'm a member of the High Power Electric Propulsion Lab, and my funding sources, definitely write this down if you're thinking about grad school, because these are some fellowships you could apply for yourself. So there's the Graduate Education for Minorities Fellowship. The way this specific fellowship works is you apply first, and then 2, you have to be accepted by the school you're applying to, and they have to agree to fund you as a GEM fellow. And then the 3rd aspect of the GEM fellowship is having sponsorship by a partner company of theirs. And so the company that sponsored me was the national lab I talked about, Los Alamos. And so that's how I had the opportunity to go there. But GEM is actually for minorities. So they have some criteria and different requirements that you should look into, but it's a really prestigious fellowship. And so it helped me to cover my tuition. I had a stipend for the first year of grad school, but my tuition and fees are covered for my entire career here. So that's really good. Definitely suggest all of you to apply. I'm sure all of you would have no problem getting it. And so the second fellowship I'm funded by is something called the NASA Space Technology Graduate Research Fellowship. It's a mouthful. But that specific fellowship is almost similar to GEM, except it's strictly through NASA. And the way it works is I get a stipend for my entire graduate career. And then I have the opportunity to work as a visiting technologist at any NASA center. And that's going to depend on like my NASA advisor and where they think it makes sense to send me. And so since I'm doing electric propulsion, the 2 NASA places that are very, very well known for EP, I'm just going to reduce that to EP. So electric propulsion is EP. The 2 NASA centers that are very well known for that are Glenn Research Center, which is where I work as a pathway student, and JPL, which is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. So that's another really good fellowship I would definitely write down and suggest people to apply to. So, excuse me, I should have had water. Going into some of the projects that we've done and that we are doing at HEPEPL, which is our like abbreviated name. The top picture here is actually a picture with the University of Gießen. And so University of Gießen is in Germany, and they have a lot of really cool ion thruster research happening. And so they tested their thruster in our chambers, our vacuum chambers. And here's a picture of our vacuum chambers in the background of my photo with this young man whose name is Chris. He's a up and coming next generation STEM professional. He's going to do awesome things. But I had the opportunity to give him a tour of the lab, and we were standing in front of one of our really, really big chambers. So our chambers are actually state of the art. For a university, that's like pretty good. A lot of companies like to come and test here and all that good stuff. So that's a part of like my grad school experience, is I test thrusters for different companies. And then the projects we have in-house, there's a specific Hall effect thruster called the H9. And so H stands for Hall thruster, excuse me. And then the 9 stands for how much power it runs on. And so this is 9 kilowatts of power. So it's a lot of power, very high power thruster. And what I'm doing, excuse me, is I'm building the cathode for that thruster. I've actually finished building it. Here's a picture. I took a selfie with it. I'm very proud of it. Had the opportunity to build this from scratch, basically. I didn't design it though. The designs are based off of things that were already being done by the University of Michigan as well as JPL. So I had to gather all the materials. That included buying stuff, that included getting stuff machined, machining stuff myself. There's so many facets to the grad school life that I think are really cool. Just having the opportunity to kind of, dip your foot into every aspect of engineering. It's not just theory all the time. It's not just hands-on all the time. I've had to lead, some of our undergrads. I've been led by some of our senior grad students. There's just so much to learn in the grad school environment, and all of it's really important, the soft skills and the hard skills. So I want to make sure, yeah. So what we're doing with this H9 thruster, with my NASA Space Technology Fellowship, I'm actually going to be using laser diagnostics to run some tests on this specific Hall effect thruster. Excuse me. And so that's really exciting. I think aerospace is such a versatile field, and that's why I love it so much. I mean, if you could kind of think about are involved in electric propulsion itself, one subfield of a huge field. There's chemistry, there's electrical engineering, there's aerospace engineering, there's physics, there's material science, there's just so much, and even optics now, because a lot of our diagnostics technology are lasers or optical, or we use optical measurement techniques. So I wanted to show a photo or a video of us testing that thruster from Germany. And so it's actually called the RIT-10. So that stands for Radio Frequency Ion Thruster. It's developed by the University of Gießen. And I took this video myself in one of our chambers. Sorry. Oh, that is so cool. So if I can just explain a little bit, what you're seeing, this plume here, is actually ions. So we start with a gas or neutral gas, so typically xenon. And then that xenon is essentially introduced into a chamber that is full of electrons. And so whenever we have an electron bombarding a neutral xenon atom, you produce an ion and an electron. And so what we do with those ions, those are what we accelerate to produce thrust. And so that's how electric propulsion works. It's actually really exciting. As you can see, it's purple here, but sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green. It just depends on your propellant and how much power you are running through your thruster. So this is so cool. This is Star Wars in action, or in real life, but much, much slower. So I'm gonna move on there. And so as I kind of start to wrap up, I just wanted to provide some general tips about just some things that I keep in the forefront of me from undergrad to now grad. Obviously, this is a very, succinct or condensed list of tips that I have. I could say so much more, but I think these are the most important, especially for anybody still figuring undergrad out and looking to go to grad school. And so the first of which I had to get very comfortable with, because I deal with imposter syndrome. I literally had a fit yesterday that was all about imposter syndrome, just feeling like I couldn't do it. I wasn't qualified. I'm not as smart as my peers, et cetera, dealing with all those silly thoughts. And because well, they're not silly, they're valid. I think, you don't want to invalidate yourself, but you have to realize that you're there because you deserve to be there. And so I have to constantly remind myself of that. But in that process, I tend to not want to ask questions, because I'm like, well, I already probably look dumb to people because I don't look like everybody else, or maybe there's already some preconceived notions or biases about me that I don't want to validate. So I'll refrain from asking questions. But my career and my academic and career, both really took a huge turn when I got comfortable asking questions. And so it didn't matter if I sounded dumb, if it was a very simple question or what, I would ask it. And obviously there were times when I would feel really good because the person answering that question was super open, or would even say that's a great question when I thought it was dumb. Or I met people who were condescending and who did take it as an opportunity to look down on me. And I just decided to let that go. One thing I really believe in is that, people are going to be condescending, and that has nothing to do with you. That is their personal flaw, and that is their business. But if you learn something from them, you win. And that's all that matters. Who cares about their opinion of you? And so that's a huge lesson that I've been continuing to reteach myself every year, every day, while I'm in academia. And so the second is another really important one, and that's establish mentors. I really attribute so much of my success to who I know, not what I know. I know you've probably heard that before, but it is so true. When I first got to college, if you don't know, I'm a first generation college student. So my parents or my mom did go to college, but unfortunately didn't get her degree for really dumb reasons that I won't get into. But technically, I'm first generation. And then, of course, I'm the first one to go into a career field like mine, which is very, very, I gotta say, internship focused. Like, I don't know of many other disciplines outside of STEM where internships are such a huge deal. And so when I first got to college, my head was, I had nothing, I didn't even really know what an internship was. And so it wasn't until I met some really amazing mentors through the NESB program, some great people named John and Jade, who told me about internships, who helped me get my resume together, who encouraged me to go to the NESB convention that year, where I attended the career fair. And that is literally how I got my first job. And so that made a world of difference in my life. They've changed my life for sure. And so I attribute that to mentors, and not just academic mentors. I have personal mentors. I have spiritual mentors. I have peer mentors who, my friends who hold me accountable. I have so many types, and I'm really just grateful for everybody, because there are so many things I could have missed out on if I just hadn't had that person looking out for me or being an advocate for me or having me on their mind and having a vested interest in me. So that's really, really important. The third is to conquer your campus. So I talk a little bit about this on the next slide, but when I got to Embry-Riddle for my undergrad degree, there was no dance club. And I'm a dancer, and I really didn't want to let it go from high school. So I ended up starting a dance club my freshman year there with a full aerospace. It was a freshman year, but still a full aerospace course load. So everybody was like, "You're ridiculous. Why would you do that?" But I needed it, and I had a feeling that I wasn't the only person on campus who needed that kind of outlet through dance. And so I was able to start the club, and then after that, I just got into, I guess, a frenzy of starting clubs and just kind of contributing to the clubs on campus, contributing to the campus environment in a positive way. And so I think this is one of the ways I really conquered my campus. And outside of just like conquering and contributing, I use my campus for what it was worth. So if you have like a career services department, I got really, really familiar and friendly with the people there, and just, essentially understood where my resources were and how to use them. And so there was actually one department on campus that I didn't learn about until senior year, and that was called the Office of Undergraduate Research. And I was so mad because I was like, if I had started research or found this department when I was in freshman year, I would be unstoppable. But I only found it until, my senior year. So I tell people all the time, you have no idea what's right under your nose. So definitely just find out what your campus has. And if there's any place where it doesn't have something that you think you can add to it, consider starting, starting your own path, starting your own path and starting your own organizations if you see a need for them. Seek well-roundedness. And so that's a really big thing for me. I was definitely not just all about my grades. You'll see later that my grades were not always in the tip-top shape. And I'm okay with that because I had a lot of other experience. I had a lot of leadership experience through the clubs I just talked about. I also had fun too. I understood that having an outlet and my mental health was an important thing. And so I made sure I made time for that. And I found clubs that also contributed to that aspect of my life. All my clubs weren't career and academic focused. Some of them were strictly for hanging out and, having fun, or at least being around, having community that could support me. And so the next is be open-minded. I definitely learned this very soon, as soon as I got to undergrad, because I actually had plans of going to the Air Force, because I thought that that was like the best way to become an astronaut, that you needed to go through the military route. I found out that wasn't true. But before I found out that wasn't true, I was in ROTC. It really wasn't for me. And I was forcing it, and I was not allowing myself to see past not being an ROTC, because being an ROTC felt like a domino effect for me. Like, if I'm not an ROTC, then I'm not in the Air Force. I'm not in the Air Force, then I can't be an astronaut. And so I had to let go of such a rigid train of thought and just kind of open my mind to other possibilities. And as soon as I left ROTC, I actually joined NSB. And I just got to say the two of those would not have worked together just because of how much time I spent or needed to spend at ROTC versus the things I got to do in NSB. So it worked out in the end. And we'll see if I become an astronaut. Fingers crossed. Fear complacency. I think that kind of speaks for itself. The grind never stops. And I should be careful with those words. The grind stops for your mental health. That's a disclaimer there. But what I meant by that was, if you remember kind of my story in the beginning about my work overview, I got my job at NASA as a sophomore. And I don't say that to brag. That did not come easy. I applied to no less than maybe 50 or 60 NASA requisitions or job placements. And I got denied so many times, so that when I actually got the NASA job, I was like, when did I apply to this? I had forgotten by the time they called me back. And so I say all that to say that, I could have got my job at NASA and just been like, okay, I'm set. Because again, it's a guaranteed job after graduation. I had nothing else to do, but I knew I had grad school ambitions. And so as soon as I secured the NASA thing, I started focusing on grad school as a sophomore. And that's actually how I found electric propulsion, by just doing that research and looking into things. I also got involved in the McNair Scholars Program, which is another undergraduate research organization for minority students. And I 100% recommend it and recommend you look into it, especially if your school has it. It's a great organization, and I attribute so much of my ability to be in grad school to that organization. So, and finally, persevere. I'm one that believes that success is a very relative thing. Like, I don't believe there's any one metric to consider yourself successful. And so for me, my definition of success is the fact that I still get up every day, and not just that I'm alive. Although I'm grateful to be alive, it's the fact that when I do get knocked down, I get up again, no matter how bad I get knocked down. And I'll shed some light on some of the failures that I've encountered or dealt with, and how I've dealt with failure, because dealing with failure is a very important thing to learn how to do, because failure is on the way to success. They're not opposite ends of the spectrum. You have your start, you have failure at some point in the middle, and then you have success. That's what I believe, at least. I don't think you have to do either or. And I don't think one failure means you can never be successful. So those are some general tips. And so here are some of the organizations I was talking about. NSB, I ended up moving up to regional membership chair, which is a regional leadership position. Organization called DreamSoar. This is my DreamSoar fam. This is Kim Kish. She's awesome. And that organization I'll talk a little bit more about, but that was like a philanthropic organization, huge STEM outreach org. I had some leadership opportunities there, which opened so many doors for me. There's the SWISE, which we all know what SWISE is, and I'm currently the head of student programs, working with Bianca. I also joined the Rocket Club, which was a totally recreational organization. But I was able to secure something called my level 1 high-powered rocketry certification, and I was able to put that on my resume, which, if I'm in an interview and somebody's like, well, what's this about? I can jump into what I've learned about high-powered rocketry. And though you're probably not going to be launching model rockets at your job, understanding the simple physics of rocketry show that, you understand how that could apply to the real life rockets, or, the bigger rockets. And so that has definitely earned me some brownie points with interviewers. And then finally, the McNair Scholars Program as an undergraduate researcher. Here's my poster presentation. This was sophomore year. So I had my opportunity to do research in sophomore year. And undergrad research is very, very big, or very, very helpful when applying to grad school. Being able to show that you have done research before, you understand the research process, you're a self-starter, you know how to kind of think about things in a research state of mind. Those things are really, really, they'll help you be competitive when applying to grad school. And finally, the dance club. So I wanted to show a video of my little rocket launch because I'm very proud of it. It was very cute. Let's see. Probably can't hear it. If it's grainy, I'm sorry.
Excellent rocket in competition. All right. Launching on 0, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Yes! Excuse my voice. So when I talk about rocketry, that's what I mean. We weren't launching little bottle rockets. My rocket got up to like, or our rocket got up to like 2,000 feet. So I see a lot of value in doing just little things like that, and with regard to your recreational stuff. And I know clearly if you guys have any access to like SEDS and you guys do any collaboration, I definitely would encourage that for the SWISE chapter, to help get everybody some technical experience, because I put my rocketry endeavors on my resume as a freshman in college. A lot of people probably wouldn't do that because they probably think it's not enough, but it is enough. It's the project, you learn some technical, and you know it counts. So I just kind of put this here because the organizations that I sought to be in were organizations that interested me, inspired me, and then were good for my mental health. So Dream Soar, I don't know how much time I have. I won't play this video. It's like 4 minutes long, but if at the end we have time, I'll play it. It's a really cool video about Dream Soar, what it was. But to give you a synopsis, Dream Soar is an organization founded by this amazing woman here, Shasta Wise. She made history as the first civilian pilot from Afghanistan. And then she made history again when she started this organization, and she flew around the world. So she circumnavigated the globe in a single engine aircraft. So she's the youngest to do that. And she did so, and she stopped in various countries along her journey around the world, and she told her story and inspired countless people. And it was an incredible thing to be part of, something so much bigger than myself. And just that ability to network with her and just the people I met through that organization have been really helpful. So here are just some NSBE pictures, and this is the NSBE mission. And then obviously, you know, SWISE. So I started the Embry-Riddle chapter of SWISE, and this is amazing people who are continuing on that legacy there at Embry-Riddle while I'm here. And then I also got involved with technical organizations. So the one that applied to me was the AIAA, which stands for American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And so this is what I mean by being well-rounded. This specific organization is where I published my first paper. And so as an undergrad, publishing papers looks great for grad school. And so it was through this organization that I got to do that. And so wrapping up, I hope I'm good on time. I'm gonna check real fast. Okay, I'm doing okay. I definitely wanted to talk about one experience that I probably talk about too much, but I'm very proud of it. And it was the time I failed, like, and not just like failed figuratively, I literally failed a class. And it wasn't just any class. It was actually one of the most important classes for my aerospace engineering coursework in undergrad. And I failed it at one of the most crucial times in my life. And by crucial times, I mean, I failed it in junior year. And so if you're applying to grad school, you probably know the time to start doing grad school applications is senior year, but you have to do so in the fall semester of your senior year. So you probably don't have a GPA for that year yet. So you have to use your spring junior year GPA. And that is when I failed the class. So like it couldn't have been the worst timing. But essentially I failed an aerodynamics 2 course that just like includes compressible aerodynamics. And I got a really, really pretty D in that class. And I'll give a little bit of background on it. It's not that important to me anymore. I had some issues with the professor. I had a death in the family. I was doing a bunch of NSBE stuff, which had me traveling like every week. So there were reasons, you know, as to why I failed. The other classes I was in were fine. I had A's and B's, but this class just ended up not going well at all. And I thought my career was over. I thought, like, I literally spiraled after that spring semester. Just to be very vulnerable with you guys, I had to call the suicide hotline. Not necessarily because I was on the verge of doing anything, but I could not get out of my head. The anxiety was just too much. I didn't want to call my mom, not because I think she'd just be disappointed. She's super understanding, but I didn't want to worry her. with the way I was talking and thinking, like, oh my God, my life's over, you know. And so it got really bad. I lost a lot of hope that day, almost that month, because after that month things changed. But I thought it was over for me, and so I'm also on a scholarship. Well, I was on a scholarship at Embry-Riddle, and so I couldn't take the extra semester to retake this class without taking like 18 credit hours for my senior year. And so I just decided I was going to retake it in the fall of my senior year. And so that semester I had 18 credit hours because I still had to graduate within 4 years just because scholarship stuff. If that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have done this. But I had 18 credit hours. I had one on-campus job because I had to pay for some stuff. And then I was also teleworking at NASA Glenn because of that SCEP project. They wanted me to help writing the paper, help write a paper for that. And so I was working like 20 hours a week and then like 10 hours or 8 hours a week, with my on-campus job. And then of course I had 18 credit hours of a full aerospace engineering, sorry about that, a full aerospace engineering course load. And so it looked impossible when I first saw that. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, retake a class I got a D in. It's, you know, it's super important that I don't get a D in that class again, or I don't even get a C. I have to ace it, or no grad school is gonna accept me. And so I was applying to grad school too. And if you have started that process, you know, applying to grad school is like another part-time job. So it was just a ridiculously busy semester. And there were a few times where I was like, I can't do this. Like, I was like, what am I doing? This is just too much. The aerodynamics class was going bad again, like toward the middle of the semester, where my homeworks weren't looking great. And I was like, am I really about to fail this class twice and then like have to pay for my last semester here because I'm here past 4 years? And then one day I just was like, okay, I'm not going to do this for myself anymore. I'm not going to keep tormenting myself. I'm Christian, and so that's one thing I rely on to help me. And so, you know, whatever that is for you, I encourage you to do that. But for me, it was like getting around my Bible study group. I had to get around them just so I could kind of help change my vision and my perspective about my situation. I got back enrolled into our counseling services on campus. I'm really big on mental health and you know, really taking it seriously. So I use the counseling resources. I learned a huge lesson that semester, and it was to decouple my self-worth from my success. And so I told myself, regardless of what happens this semester, I am not gonna beat myself up for it. Like, I am not going to, if I get a D, if I fail all my classes, that doesn't make Naya bad. That doesn't make Naya dumb. It just means I failed my classes. And so that was a huge step for me because before that, every failed test was like the end of the world for me. I was like, I can't live like that. You know, people make mistakes and failure isn't the end. I had to start eating rejection for breakfast because failure is inevitable. And rejection, I started taking it, you know, very differently based off that experience. I started to apply, especially when I'm not qualified. Because if I had allowed myself to continue thinking the way I was at the end of that spring semester that I failed the class, I would not have applied to grad school at all. Because I would have said, they're going to see that D and like shred my application. They probably won't even throw it away. They're going to shred it. And so, but I did it anyway. I just decided that I would try. I would give it a shot. I would put my best foot forward. And I guess I can wrap up the story. I'm probably going way too long, but I ended up getting an A in that class in that fall semester. And so that looked really good to the places I applied to because yes, they saw the D, but they saw how I came back from it. And that's more important than just passing all your classes. How you can come back from failure says so much more about who you are and what you're capable of than, you know, just what you're technically capable of. And so outside of getting an A in that class, I actually got the highest GPA I've ever had in my undergrad career and one of the hardest semesters. It's so funny how that works. But I also got into Georgia Tech. I got into Purdue. I got into Carnegie Mellon. All the bigger schools that I was like, they're not even going to look my way once they see that D. And, you know, one important part of me getting in, I know for sure, was me being real about it. Like me in my personal statement saying, you know, yes, if you'll probably see in this semester that I had this grade, but I would like to just explain the circumstances behind that grade. And so if you're writing notes, it's a really big one. If you have discrepancies anywhere in your application packages, make sure you talk about them. Don't let it surprise the reviewers, just let them know, you know. And I did the same when I got that fellowship with NASA too. And they actually wrote in their feedback, you know, yeah, she fell short, but it looks like she recouped, and she also was resilient. And we also realized that it's not just her failures in classes were not just attributed to what, you know, how intelligent she was. There were external circumstances, and anybody worth working with, working for, or any organization worth working for would understand that circumstances do affect, you know, your GPA, your research experience, et cetera, et cetera. So just always include it, and always still apply regardless of if you don't feel qualified. And then finally, be gentle with yourself. I had to really learn how to extend compassion to myself, and allow myself to, first of all, feel the feelings I was feeling, because they were valid. I was freaked out, but I couldn't stay there for too long. And then be gentle with myself enough to seek help too. And it really made a world of difference when I sought help. So, sorry. Oh, it was a really good semester. So I got the dean's list. And this is my contact information, and I'm pretty much wrapped up. So I'll leave this up here for anybody who wants to take that down. I have a blog on my website, a forum where I give a lot of grad school tips and etc. You can also find that stuff on Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram. It's everywhere. So thank you guys so much for having me, and I'll welcome any questions if we have the time. I know we're running right at 6.
Well, thank you, Naya, for such a great presentation. I think that we can agree that you really inspire us with your extraordinary career path. I don't know if someone has any questions, you can write them in the chat and Naya will answer them.
Sure.